Good morning, everybody. My name is Jack Fitzgerald. I'm the ETA Graduate Club President, here to introduce our workshop and our speakers today. So the title of this workshop is How to Find Acquisition Targets, and I would like to introduce Reed Tylson, an ETA entrepreneur and professor at the Weatherhead School of Management, specializing in ETA. He's also the first ETA PhD candidate in the U.S. and mentor at Promise Partners ETA Accelerator. We also have with us Brian Cox, the owner and CEO of C&R Restaurant Group, a franchisee of Taco Bell with 50 locations and a Weatherhead School alumnus. Let's give them a warm welcome.
All right, happy Wednesday and good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. Before we get started, I'd like to get a sense of who we have here in the room. So if you're someone who is thinking about starting a search, thinking about being an ETA practitioner, can you raise your hand? Very cool, very cool. We're excited for you to think about embarking upon this journey. Now, if you're somebody like Larry Fulton here, who's actively searching in the trenches, trying to find a business right now, can you raise your hand? Yeah. How long have you been searching?
We've been in the search for a couple years.
Great. How's the process been?
Not great.
Not great? Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is searching's hard, right? Yeah. It can be lonely, it's a grind, it's draining. And this whole ETA thing is all fun and games until you can't actually find a company to buy, right? Yeah, and that's the truth. So thank you for that. And Brian, do we have a gift card for that individual for being the first person to speak?
We have a wonderful.
Yeah, give it up. Yeah, you can take the next business owner that you take out to lunch to Taco Bell with that now. So. You know, I would tell you that a lot of these deals that happen actually happen over the quote-unquote kitchen table, and we'll talk about how relationships matter a lot with that, so I would tell you yes. Great. Okay, do we have any business owners here? All right, for those of you that are looking to search, notice who has their hand up right now, because deals genuinely start and happen at conferences like this, and the really good searchers, Kevin, as we talked about earlier, will use this opportunity to make those connections. And last but not least, any service providers in the room? Very cool, very cool. I know we got Steve back there from Huntington Bank, great SBA lender. So everybody, thank you so much for coming out today. Basically, it's deal sourcing, how to grit it done. General agenda, as you're going to find out, it's going to be highly interactive. If you have questions, raise your hand. If you have something that you're really passionate about saying, feel free to just shout it out, and we'll make this as conversational as we possibly can. We're just going to go through some statistics, some fun facts, a couple best practices as well. If we have time, which we probably won't because we'll have a dynamic conversation, we'll talk about some of the behavioral attributes of people that actually find businesses to buy, and then we'll certainly talk a bit about franchising. So with that, let's just talk about the high-level reason that we're here. It is essentially an undisputable fact that people that are self-employed are happier than people that have W-2 jobs. So 5,840 under-happy hours per year is the choice that you make if you're not self-employed. Assuming you're sleeping at least 8 hours a night. Who here is self-employed currently? Who here has a W-2 job? So that first group is on average going to be happier than that second group. All right, secondly is I want to talk about the idea of locomotion briefly. High level, there's two human states, right? The state of self-assessment when you're thinking about doing something versus the state of actually locomotion and going towards it. Who thinks that human beings are happier in a state of self-assessment versus locomotion? Who here thinks they're happier in a state of locomotion? Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of actually deal sourcing, is it Nicholas or Nick? Doesn't matter, Nick. Is that because you're focused on where you're going, you're going to be a lot happier than that first group of people that was thinking about if they want to do ETA or not. So a little bit of positive rah-rah as we go into this. All right. So let's talk about sourcing. At the end of the day, it's really easy to come to an ETA conference like this, get all excited about going out there and buying a business like Nick talked about, but the ball game is sourcing. You have to actually find a business to make this whole thing work. The upside is that one cool thing about doing deal sourcing is that you're going to learn a lot about the US economy. You're going to find businesses that you didn't even know existed out there. From someone who's currently searching right now, what's a fascinating business that you found that you didn't even think existed before? Just raise your hand. Yes.
I found a client who cleans industrial filters.
Yeah. And you know, I've owned a business that cleaned industrial filters at like 50+% gross margins. And some of those dirty, off the beaten path businesses are absolutely great ways to go. Brian, in your time owning businesses, what's one industry you've come across that you didn't even think existed?
Well, there's many. I think the thing is when you get on this side, I was in a corporate job for 30 years almost. And I mean, when you get on this side, you really start to network and talk to people that own businesses, and you're amazed at how people make money. I mean, cleaning industrial filters, right? I mean, that's a niche. So it's similar. I can't think of one right now, but it is amazing how when you get on this side, it just makes you think differently. I mean, having been a corporate guy, like I said, my whole life, you get on this side, and I don't know if I guess it's the risk you have to take, and running a business, trying to make sure that you're providing a livelihood for a bunch of folks. It just makes you think differently, and then you end up in these networks where you just go, wow, I never thought of that as a way to make money. So anyone who's looking for a business, just keep at it. That's all I can say. Just be tenacious and just keep at it. Don't give up hope. I mean, I was 47 when I finally jumped out there. So you never know when it's going to happen.
Awesome. All right, now let's see a slide you've all been looking for. It's the key, the secret to finding your dream business. Who's excited? Yeah, all right. So 2 questions you want to ask. One, where are you credible, okay? There's a lot of people looking for businesses to buy. The critical part is understanding where you're credible. And second, throughout this process, what your sourcing superpower is. So keep those things in mind. With that said, here's all the ways you can do it, right? There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. What I'll point out to you on there is that I could tell you a story about someone that found a credible lead through all of those options on there. You'll see up there, ETA conference. I also teach ETA at BYU, and BYU does a conference in February. There was a really industrious individual who just made it his intention to meet as many business owners as he possibly could at the ETA conference. And he met a guy that actually owned 20 Jersey Mikes. And that guy said, you know what? My brother owns a business here in Utah that I'm actually a minority partner in. And yeah, he's thinking about selling it. He's kind of like starting to talk in intermediaries and stuff like that. And that started a conversation that led to a signed LOI. And this is like a deal of about $1.8 million of EBITDA, really good business. And that deal got closed about 7 weeks ago. The individual met this person, met his brother at an ETA conference, started the conversation at perfect timing, and now he is a little bit too big of a deal for him to totally self-fund, so he brought on investors, unfortunately. Just my opinion about it. But he's CEO of a $1.8 million company in Salt Lake City. And that started at an ETA conference. So someone just choose one of those on there, maybe, yes?
Yeah, so on the Western U.S. thread,
Yeah.
talk to us about river guides. Finding deals on the Grand Canyon, on the Colorado River.
Yeah, totally. So do you know what a river guide stands for?
I don't.
Okay, so what a river guide is basically someone who's an industry expert. So for example, if you want to buy something in the QSR space or Taco Bell, Brian could be your river guide. And when you go up to Brian, you'd say, Brian, listen, you've been in this industry for a while, you're really well networked. I'm looking for deals. Can you kind of show me the industry, and then potentially you could offer to pay him a referral fee, what I see in the market right now, and I'd be curious to get feedback from people in the room, anywhere from 1% to 3% for a finder's fee, and you can get someone to kind of take you as an outsider and show you in the industry there. So a lot of people have successfully used river guides, and the guy that coined that term, name is Jim Southern, who was kind of like the father of search funds from Harvard University way back in the 80s. And he might be a little too cool to come to a place like Cleveland or Case Western to talk, but if you were to still go chat with him, he would tell you that river guides are still the best way to find a deal. Mr. Fulton. And by the way, Larry is a highly successful, awesome search fund or practitioner. He's bought and sold companies. Whatever he says is like the gospel coming up here.
Well, I have more of a question. So
Yeah.
under corporate divestitures, can you talk about that briefly, about how to go about finding some corporate divestitures?
Yeah, it's and this is an underutilized area that a lot of, I think, self-funded searchers particularly don't think about, is that there's companies out there that have small divisions, small practices that they just don't want to have. It might have been from a previous acquisition. They got a new CEO and it doesn't align to their long-term strategy. So if you know people that work at big companies, just put out there and say, hey, listen, I'm looking to be a business owner, and if there's anyone in your company you can introduce me to that might be thinking about, spinning off a small thing, you can find deals that way. I have a classmate from Chicago Booth. I have a lot of classmates from Chicago Booth that have done this from the private equity side. I have one friend from Chicago Booth that has done this as a self-funded searcher. He just went out and he hit up all of his people he knew from business school on LinkedIn with kind of that message, and he found a good solid deal. This one closed maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So it's something that can absolutely happen. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, one more on there. And if you don't know what the acronym means, that's a great one to ask as well. YPO. Who knows what YPO is? Seth, what's YPO? Yeah. So it stands for Young Presidents Organization. Essentially, if you're the owner or the CEO, or sometimes like if you run a big division for a company, you can join it. So it's a networking group of really high caliber business owners or CEOs. The individual that I know that bought a business that way, it was actually similar to the corporate spinoff deal, is that he reached out to a friend of his that was in a YPO chapter in the Twin Cities in particular, and he offered, he said, listen, I'm looking for a business to buy. I know you're in YPO. Can you float my name around to some of your people in the space? He did, and eventually the deal that he found was from that individual's YPO group. So when it comes to proprietary sourcing, it's got to be real scrappy. And a key theme that we're going to hit on is the relationships, right? And how you want to use those relationships to leverage closing the deal. All right, cool. So essentially, when it comes to sourcing, there is 2 high-level types. One, you can start with proprietary sourcing, or you can use a brokerage search strategy. This is from a PPM of an individual who has a search fund right now. You can see that on the proprietary side, you're going to utilize LinkedIn, email, lots of A/B testing to see what works. Yes? Great question. It's a private placement memorandum. So when this individual, as a traditional search funder, was going out and trying to raise money from investors, that's what a PPM is. This is one of the slides that he showed to talk about his deal sourcing strategy. So on the proprietary side, lots of outreach. A great practice in deal sourcing is utilizing unpaid interns, either undergraduates or MBAs, to help build these lists, to help send out the emails, et cetera, et cetera. Secondly is with the brokerage search strategy, and that's where you work with intermediaries, and we'll talk about what some of the statistics on who's using intermediaries and who's closing them or not. But I want you to notice on the intermediary there that it's not just a random one, right? He's utilizing people in his network. He's also a Booth alum, and he's a veteran, so he's going after business brokers that fit both of those criteria. All right, questions about proprietary searching versus intermediary searching? Question for the group. For self-funded searchers right now, people that do not have a traditional search fund, what percent do you think are finding deals with some kind of intermediary versus finding deals on the proprietary side? Intermediaries, what do you think? What percent? 50, third, 10? Good variance. So right now, the latest study I saw, it's about 60%. So 60% of self-funded searchers are finding deals from intermediaries as opposed to going the proprietary route. All right. Yes.
Reed, I heard a stat, I don't know if it's true or not, about how, oh, sorry. I heard a stat the other day about the percentage of people who buy businesses that are small or under a couple million in value are first-time buyers. Do you know what that percentage is? I've heard it's as high as 60%.
I do not know what that is, but that statistic would not surprise me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it goes into credibility, right? Because if you're a first-time buyer, you have no experience, owning franchises, you have no experience in small business, where are you actually going to be credible? And that's the key to ask. Where are you, Jim, individually going to be credible? Because, Brian, how often do you get hit up to sell your Taco Bells?
Oh, I mean, pretty often. I mean, there's a lot of buyers out there right now for Taco Bells. When we bought the Taco Bells, I had a little bit of a different path. I was working for Taco Bell corporate for almost 8 years, and so I kind of knew it from the inside. And Taco Bell was refranchising, basically selling corporate Taco Bells in LA, and so we had to put in a bid and put the whole capital stack together. We needed an equity partner. It was a pretty big deal. We bought 29 out of the gate. This was 12 years ago, so the brand wasn't even as strong as it is now. But yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, when you're on the corporate side, you know a decent amount, but you know nothing about how do you put a capital stack together, how do you run a company, how do you make the decisions about bonus structure and benefits and all those things. So it was really an interesting process. But that was my particular path. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to get there.
And the other thing I want to point out to that too is that different business owners have different avatars, right? Like some business owners will credibly not want to sell to private equity or a strategic. They will actually be happy to be like, you know what, I want to give this individual, Jim, who's never owned a business, a challenge. So you shouldn't make assumptions based on generalities. But what a good way to think about it is ask yourself consistently, where are you credible? And secondly, given that list of options up there, what's your superpower, right? Are you good at in-person networking? Are you good at building like a CRM and doing a lot of LinkedIn messaging? Are you good at in-person interactions? That's how I encourage people to think about how to go through the deal sourcing process.
Well, you can't sort of reinforce enough. It's about networking, right? It's about putting it out there and making sure folks know that's what you're doing. I mean, in our case, trying to find an equity partner, that was the challenge, right? And we just kept putting it out to friends, and that was how I found our equity guy, was through a friend, through the network. So it was just putting it out there. We were having dinner with one of our friends. My wife and I were having dinner with this couple friend of ours, and he goes, "Yeah, I think I know somebody." But that was 6 months down the road. You know what I mean? It was a grind. So.
Awesome. All right, so some high-level sourcing tools. One, critical to have a CRM. Any CRM works. I like to use Salesforce personally. Gotta have a website. If we have access to internet here, we'll click on this individual. So this is an individual who's searching for a business right now. Just as you build credibility, because sellers will check this stuff, right? Got to have something basic. What you're looking for, criteria, whole 9 yards. Almost everybody who's searching for a business right now that's credible has a website to the minimum of this caliber here. And I don't know if we'll see it on here or not, but he lists some advisors on here, which usually I end up on this list. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm not sure where it'll lie today exactly. But critical to have a website so you can come across as being credible. Okay, outside of that, have a one-pager illustrating what you saw on that website with what your basic criteria are, geography, EBITDA, your background, your credibility to own a business, what your credit score is, all those things. The more you put out there, the more credible you'll come across in the marketplace. And a question for Steve back there. Steve, can we underestimate how important that credibility is with those one-pagers and stuff?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is incredibly important because I don't care what the LOI says, if you don't have credibility that you can actually follow through on the deal, none of it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, who knows what PFS stands for? Yep, Paul? Personal financial statement. On this theme of credibility, have a PFS ready. My personal favorite is to have an SBA 1919 form because it says on the bottom, if you lie on here, you're committing perjury, so it illustrates that what there is real. But having a PFS, critical, and then buffering that with having actual financial statements from like Schwab or from, there's someone up there from Vanguard, right? Showing the actual liquid assets that you can do this deal or a letter from investors, paramount importance. Because there's so many people looking for businesses, right? You have the Scaleco guys who you'll hear from later. You have private equity, you have strategics, you have people like Larry up there, a guy that's bought and sold several businesses, right? That you got to come across, especially as a first timer, that you have the motivation, that you have the financial credibility to do this, and that you're taking it seriously. Yeah.
This is essentially like proof of funds. And are there groups that can help put this together with you, or is this just something like you said, like put together all your accounts and have it available to be able to showcase?
It's funny you mention that because with the influx of interest in ETA these days, there is groups you can pay anything for, right, to help you in this process, right? And I will tell you, it's becoming like the gold rush. I think a lot of people making money are the ones that are monetizing the process and not necessarily the people that are actually doing it. Different panel conversation for that. But it's definitely something that you can put together on your own. I think if you take one of the variety of like ETA classes that are offered, it's like an exercise that we can go through with it. But you can certainly have like a wealth manager or a banker help you with that process as well.
Okay, cool. And you had mentioned the SBA 1919. That's something you can just do on your own then?
Yeah. Go online, fill it out. Pretty simple. There's a variety of SBA lenders here. Steve is obviously one of them, so I'd highly encourage you to go ping him afterwards. But Steve's a pretty ambitious guy. He'll probably come find you right after this conversation. Awesome. Yeah.
Just on the CRM question, can you expand on that? I only know Salesforce or anything like that. Somebody using that to keep track of their contacts, et cetera.
Yeah, the key is just use any CRM, but you want to have a way to manage the business owner lists that you have and the leads that you have. And there's a really secondary, interesting reason to do that. A great source of deal flow is from searchers that have either found a business to buy and are no longer searching, or decide that they just don't want to search anymore. They're going to have a list of business owners and a list of leads that they got to a certain point, and that is really valuable. And again, a big theme that Brian and I are going to hit on today is the power of relationships in this whole process. That's why it's good that when you're at a conference like this to meet the people that are searching, because that could very well be your source of deal flow going forward. I believe in the idea of paying it forward. So if I had a CRM with a list of like 30 leads, I would just give it to another searcher. I do know some searchers, though, that basically charge other searchers to get access to that. But John, to your question, though, if you have that and you track it, it'll make your search more efficient, right? Because you can put in there like the owner's birthday, information about the owner, the notes and everything. But it's also a great thing to have that you can help other searchers, or if you want to, monetize it on the back end. The key is to have an infrastructure in place, and we'll talk more about that, and also why it's critical to have an actual marketing machine set up. Because when it comes to proprietary sourcing, the top left number there is 20,000 outbound messages sent to business owners. And the bottom number there is 1 deal closed. Brian, what do you think about the number of sending 20,000 messages to get a single deal closed?
that sounds overwhelming, but you know it makes sense, right? I mean, you're gonna have to really put it out there, and you know, as we said before, the importance of networking and just really getting it out there to multiple resources so that you can find the deal.
And the other thing too, which Seth and I were talking about earlier, is notice that on the far right side of it, in the bottom, 30 LOIs submitted, 10 LOIs accepted to get one deal closed. Who knows what an LOI is? Yes. Yeah, and what's a letter of intent? Yeah, it's like your offer for the business, basically. So even when you find that dream business, when Brian's like, I'm going to sell you 8 of my Taco Bells at a 2x, EBITDA multiple, you still have to get the LOI, and then Brian might change his mind, decide something didn't work out, and the deal won't close.
It's 9 to 11, by the way, the multiple. But you know, you never know. I mean, I was part of a entrepreneur forum recently out in California, and I was struck. One of the participants was a couple that was getting up there. They're probably in their 70s, and they had started a very successful architecture firm. Wasn't sexy. They provided plans for a lot of builders and just built sort of, cookie cutter standard homes. And neither one of their sons are interested in the business, and they can't find anybody to buy the business. They say we hire architects, young architects who we think are, excited about buying the business, somebody we could transition to. They're not willing to take the risk, They want somebody to just carry all the money back for them. And so that's the thing. If you're willing to take a risk, there's going to be people out there. You just got to find them. Because there's people, just as there's people in this room looking for businesses, there's people out there wanting to sell. And they don't know to use a broker, or they don't know what, all the things we're talking about here. Yeah. So just keep at it.
Yeah, go ahead. And that is the biggest challenge of being a self-funded searcher, is that if you hire, Seth, for example, from Roman Myers to, do the purchase agreement for you, and the deal falls apart, then whatever fees he charged you, that's going to essentially be yours to eat. And if you hire, is there an accountant in the room here, or a CPA? Yeah, what's your name? If you hire Ken to do like your quality of earnings to make sure that the books are what they say they are, Ken might charge you $10,000 or $15,000. However, when that deal doesn't go through, you're gonna have to pay both of those. So maybe Seth's fees were $20,000, his fees were, maybe you negotiated $10,000. You got $30,000 out of pocket that you're not gonna get back as a self-funded searcher. And that's one reason that doing a traditional search fund can make a lot of sense, because those fees are, you raise them as part of your search fund, but you gotta be ready for that. Are you married or single? Yeah, so if you spent $30,000 on some advisors and that money didn't come back, how's your wife gonna feel about that? Yeah, not great. By the way, is the couple who's searching in the room here? I met them earlier. Are you searching? Yeah, cool. You're searching with your partner? Yeah, so that'll help mitigate that conversation in your case. Awesome. All right, so the point is, when it comes to proprietary sourcing, it's a numbers game. And I will tell you that I get pinged all the time and I'm chairman of a company currently that I sold. Even as chairman, I get pinged numerous times a week from people that want to buy the businesses. So there's a lot of sophisticated searchers out there doing this. But it's a numbers game, because to Brian's point, you might find that owner who got the 9th email that week that had a bad day, and it'll start that conversation. And also, if I was in your shoes, not to make you too popular, I would go ask Brian afterwards about his architect friend that's looking to sell, right? Those conversations can potentially lead places. Brian's like, I'm never doing a panel with you again. All right, cool. The reason this is up here, this is from the Stanford Search Fund Primer. It just shows basically how traditional search funders find deals based on size. Low-hanging fruit question. What is the one consistent one from 500K to 50 million? Personal contacts, right? It is not about what you know when it comes to deal sourcing. It is about who you know. And these networks can be built over a long career. They can be built at coming to conferences like this. It can be built at taking classes. This is a relationship game at its core. Now you might, yes?
The point that you made about the costs and getting divorced as a result of $30,000 or $20,000 of accounting fees and legal fees. there are firms out there, mine being one of them, and I know there's some other accounting firms out there. You can cut sidecar deals if they've got sidecars, and they can take a percentage instead of fee you out. If they believe in the business and they want you to succeed, keep that in mind in terms of both on the accounting side and the legal side for cost cutting.
And let me ask you one question on that, though. How do you determine if you'd actually do a deal like that with them?
You're going to vet the living, you know what, out of them and make sure they've got all the checklist stuff that you've listed before, because we're not going to invest in a company that we don't believe in, or the credibility, or all the things that you're talking about. But sidecars sometimes are available, and that can keep your search fees down, both on the accounting and the legal side.
Yeah, and the key is, to echo what Seth said, it's about being credible in this process, because if you're credible, then the intermediaries like Bill are going to want to work with you, right? Then Seth is going to be down to say, okay, I'll give you a call, or I'll cut you a sidecar deal. If they think you're credible and you're actually going to find a business to buy, this whole process will become a lot easier, and sellers are going to be more willing to want to work with you in that process as well. So awesome, thank you for that. Cool. All right, so one great way to start sourcing is to just pick an industry and then start there. This is actually from someone that took my class a few months ago. They like golf. So their proprietary searching strategy is, again, hit up LinkedIn, email to go after anyone in the golf space. Golf courses, manufacturers, whole 9 yards, lots of A/B testing, lots of use of interns. I cannot stress enough that there are undergraduate students, there are MBA students that are interested in this ETA space that will work for searchers for free for the experience, sometimes even for class credit, that can help you with this searching. So as you're going down this process, I encourage you to utilize your networks, reach out to people in the space, and utilize interns. It is a fantastic source of complementary labor. In addition, on the brokerage side, focused here in Northeast Ohio, reach out to brokers that know the golfing space and go from there. Will this individual probably buy something in golf? No, but starting with the industry is a great anchor to move on to other things from there. All right, questions, comments so far? Yes.
How would you, like, this isn't to mean private equity, but like, let's look at an individual searcher, and once you start getting into that million and a half EBITDA, private equity can sometimes come in with
some pretty high valuations.
Yeah.
How would you differentiate yourself if you were an individual borrower? Because, you know, they do tend to give some crazy multiples sometimes.
Yeah, and I've done the research on this, right? Like some sellers, including a seller that I actually bought a business from, Steve, I will tell you the seller is a great guy, but he is I would describe him, and I say this in the nicest possible way, I would describe him as a sociopath, and I would describe him as someone that just really cared about getting top dollar for his business and getting out of there as quickly as possible. One upside to that is that it was in his self-interest, I think, to be honest in the dealings, because if he wasn't honest, he knew that I'd hire Seth to go sue him afterwards, right? But the key is that some sellers care about price, but other sellers, they will take a discount for knowing that their legacy, that their team members are going to be taken care of. They'll take a discount, and I'm sure you see this in the marketplace, for being like, hey, I'm an individual business owner. I want to sell to another individual business owner because I think that there's too much consolidation in the US economy and I want to empower more business owners. So the critical part is you don't make assumptions about what the seller's utility points are. You have your utility points as a buyer, but take the time to listen and to learn to what the seller actually is looking for. And if they're using an intermediary, then the good intermediaries like Bill, they will have good relationships with the sellers, and they will be able to tell you as a buyer what they actually care about. I mean, so Brian, for example, are you going to sell your business solely based on price when you sell?
No, and I was going to say, it's absolutely right what you just said. I've seen it firsthand with Taco Bell franchisees that we're selling. You spend all that time building a business, it's your baby, and your team members, especially the core team, they're important to you, and you want to make sure they're taken care of. And so I've seen firsthand where, a franchisee hasn't gotten top dollar because they knew that they were going to be able to transition and everybody on their team was going to be kept whole and, you know, employed by the new franchisee. So that's a big consideration.
Yeah. Yes.
So, how do you feel about showing up as Reed or as Elm Capital Partners?
I think that, quite frankly, you'd want to show up as both. You want to show up as an individual that's going to be the face of the business. But one great thing about Elm Tree is that you're showing up like you have credibility, right? That there's all these big name investors that are backing you up. You took the time to put that website up. You show that credibility, but also show up as a person. And to build on that and the other question, and Steve's point too, if you look at what actually drives satisfaction among sellers, this is an interesting point you can tell sellers, is that being blinded by the price, so getting that 12x offer by private equity, sellers that took that and didn't consider the other intangible offers tend to be less satisfied on the back end, even controlling for issues like price. You had a question earlier, Sam?
I did, but you answered it as you were.
Yes, awesome. So we're going. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm working with a buyer and trying to provide financing. He's got a successful IT firm.
Mm-hmm.
We've approved 2 different deals to provide financing, and they both fell apart in the negotiation of the purchase agreement stage after they've signed the LOI, obviously. So I think maybe you answered a little bit about it. Maybe if I try to provide him guidance, my borrower, about making sure he understands the hot buttons with the seller before he gets into the deal, too far into the deal. Is that, or do you have any other kind of guidance you would?
Yeah, I
you
mean,
could talk about that, because 2 deals in a row now, we've just wasted our time. Got the financing. It's a very competitive deal and great borrower, and it's just fallen apart twice now in the purchase agreement stage.
Yeah, because of the seller.
Because of the buyer. Really.
Ah.
Him not understanding, I think, what the seller really wants out of
Mm.
it. So I don't know if he's doing enough due diligence up front when he signed the LOI or not. But
Yeah.
tips on that.
The best tip is that deals, as we went on that previous slide, fall apart post LOI, even post purchase agreement, all the time. So the key, as one is sourcing, is it's fine to fall in love with the business that you want and go after it. But the successful searchers out there, the people like the Larry Fultons of the group, they will always have numerous deals that they're looking at, and even when it gets really close to close time, they have other options in the pipeline, and they're disciplined enough to keep the pipeline going, which is great because it prevents individuals from having the optionality and having a better BATNA, I think leads to more clear decision making overall. But the best way I can answer your question is make sure that your deal pipeline is always hot up until you actually close the deal. And people ask me all the time, from an ethical standpoint, is it okay to have 6 businesses under LOI? And I will tell them, absolutely it is. It's just part of the nature of how the game works, right? The seller, if you have a signed LOI, is going to agree to exclusivity with you, but these deals fall apart all the time, right? So it's critical that you're looking at numerous deals as you're going through. Awesome. Keep the questions coming. How are we doing on time, by the way? Cool. All right, we'll leave a few more minutes at the end. Just a note on numbers of people that are closing. This is from the Stanford Search Fund Primer. It shows that individuals that went to top tier business schools, Stanford, Harvard, Weatherhead School of Management, right? That those that are going out and searching, about 2/3 of them are finding companies to buy. About 1/3 of them are not. So just realize that as you go through this endeavor, it is not a 100% chance that you're going to find something. Yeah. Yeah, they are, and I'm going to go into that in a quick second. It's different. And one quick note about why traditional is different is that these are investor-backed deals where the investors will only back them if they're going to show a very strong IRR. So a lot of those deals end up getting rejected. Ironically, to give you a sense of some of the self-funded side, so there's a cool study of people that took an ETA course for executives over 7 years, 1,128 participants. Overall, about 300 of them chose to start searching, some full-time, some part-time. But of all the ones that took the class, only 4.5% acquired. But of those that were actively searching over that time frame, about 23% ended up acquiring. some full-time, some part-time. With that said, proprietary versus intermediary, we went through that a bit earlier. If you take that 54 plus that 6%, about 60% are finding deals from intermediaries versus doing proprietary. Full-time versus part-time, over a 1-year period for a group that was searching full-time versus part-time, the difference was 58 to 46%. So people that search full-time tend to close on average a bit higher than those that search part-time. To me, though, intuitively, that number seems like it should be wider. Anyone want to care to venture a guess as to one reason it's not? If you're searching part-time, you probably have a full-time job, right? Which means you have what? You have more money. So a lot of part-time searchers will pay sell-side advisors to find them companies to buy, which is one unique way to think about how you want to allocate a full-time search, being all in versus part-time. Yeah. Yeah, it's the idea that you can reach out. Are there any intermediaries here in the group? I know Bill's one. So oftentimes intermediaries, and you can go talk to them afterwards, you can pay them money, certain amount of dollars per month, and they will bring you qualified businesses that could potentially fit your criteria. I've seen people buy businesses with this. I've seen people be really unhappy they spent that money and thought they could have done a better job for themselves, but it's certainly an option to curate deal flow. All right. So with that, I know we have about 5 minutes left. Thank you so much for everyone's participation so far, but I'll open it up for questions before we wind things down. We've been so good at hitting all of them as we've been going, I guess. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Otherwise, I'll keep on going for a few. Yes? Yeah, seriously. I wrote a book called Grit It Done. Everyone's encouraged to check it out. Step-by-step process. Yep. Love the plug right there. Yes?
There's one thing. You talked about business in general, but everything's a niche. We talk business, but yet there's the lane all the way through, from services to manufacturing. There's so much to do. Choosing the lane that you're interested in and are willing to be passionate about, and putting your heart and soul into it, you can't just cast a net. You cast a big net, it's going to pitch a small pitch.
Yeah. And the thing is that I would tell you to start in that area that you're like super passionate about. Start where what's that C word I love using? Credible, right? Start in the industry that you're credible, where you have like the best network, where you just know the business, where you're going to be the most viable to actually buy it and successfully run it. Certainly start there and start in a size range that you're credible to actually close a deal in, right? That's the best starting point. With that said, though, buying a business can be challenging. So start there and then continually iterate, try new industries, go where the winds take you. My personal story, my background at one point was in fitness and franchising, and that's the only areas that I was sourcing in. But then I started to look outside that, and I found a fantastic industrial services business that I bought, grew, sold, and now I don't have to work again, right? Even though before I bought it, I was not handy at all. I had no idea about industrial services, but I ended up learning. So I tell you to start where you're credible, knowing this searching path is exceptionally non-linear, and there's plenty of success stories out there of people that have done similar to what I've done and really bought outside their experience and applied that entrepreneurial mindset to the acquisition. So great question, great point. All right, any others? Yeah.
How often do you see when an NDA will prevent, you sign it with one seller and then it actually blocks you from looking at other similar businesses? Do you guys run into that frequently?
I've seen a lot of crazy things in NDAs that are just absolutely ridiculous. NDAs are highly negotiable. So when I sign an NDA, in general, I will, only sign it. It'll expire unconditionally in 6 months. And if I had a restriction like that, I would have a very serious conversation about it. I probably wouldn't sign it. I want to have as much flexibility as possible. But I'm probably the rare exception of someone that actually agrees to the things that I sign, I think a lot of people will just kind of blanket sign NDAs and not actually pay attention to what they say, which I think is unfortunate. Great question. Anything to add, Brian?
I think everyone probably understands the difference between, finding a company that's, selling that has, a couple owners that have started that business versus franchising, right? I mean, with franchising, you kind of get a system, right? You end up being a part of a community. When we went from corporate to the franchise group, I mean, all the franchisees were willing to give us advice and help us out, right? So that's one thing you get. Obviously, you get a brand that's established. You get marketing. There's, in other words, for me, I have to figure out the operational side of the business, the people side of the business, those kinds of things, legal. But all the marketing and other things are figured out for you, right? So that's sort of one of the benefits maybe of going with franchising.
Yeah. The numbers on that is that solo searchers actually tend to have a higher close rate for traditional search fund than partnered searches. And right now on the self-funded side, it's about 3/4 of people that are searching are solo, and about 1/4 are partnered. So, and to build on what Brian said about franchising, again, 805,000 franchise locations in the U.S., $860 billion. But the key, who knows what an FDD is, by the way? That's not named Brian? Yes. Yeah, so FDDs, if they operate in Wisconsin, Minnesota, or California, are public. So you can find all the information about how franchises perform. You can also find every single owner's contact information. Sometimes it's as an entity, so you just have to go to white pages and figure out who the owner is. You can find all the information. It's all public. And as Brian pointed out, you have the systems and you have the support community once you're an owner. You're saying?
Well, I was going to say, and franchise businesses are in every area, right? I mean, elder care, health care, restaurants. And so there's publications out there, the Franchise Times, multi-unit franchise. You can subscribe to these things, and it'll help you start to think about maybe where you might want to search. Obviously, I'm in the restaurant sector. There's the QSR magazine and restaurant news. And then there's conferences, there's conventions you can go to. They're not cheap. They're around $1,000 to attend, but usually they're in Vegas or Phoenix, somewhere nice and warm. And they're usually in the wintertime back here. But that's not a bad place to go either, because you'll have these huge convention areas set up with tables, and all the brands are there. If you go to the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference in November, all the lenders are there, all the private equity. There's a lot of ways to do this. So those are good resources if that's an avenue you like to go.
And a great thing about franchising too is that it's easier to find a business to buy once you're already a business owner. Deal flow follows those that are credible, and being a franchisee is a great way to get in there without going through the painful process of finding one on your own. All right, so a couple key takeaways. One business, and then you can go out there and live the American dream, so keep that in mind. It's like marriage, it only takes one, right, Kevin? It only takes one. Relationships are a critical factor for deal sourcing. Utilize the relationships from this conference, in this room with both business owners, but also to your peers, with your fellow searchers. Last but not least, deal flow follows credibility. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free to come talk to us afterwards.